Hey guys, Denise with Lazy K Homestead. How are you? Well, this is the countdown to Christmas, December 1st. As promised, I'm going to make a Christmas cake. First of all, if you're looking at me and you're thinking, she looks different, well, I tried something different with my hair, and it's a little dark, but it covered the gray. So anyway, this cake that I'm going to make is along the lines of Olivia Walton's applesauce cake, which was her Christmas cake and their tradition in their family. So on my TV over there, I've got the Homecoming on, and the Homecoming was the movie that depicted Earl Hamner Jr.'s life in the mountains of Virginia. Now, I grew up in Virginia. I wasn't born there, but I was raised there, so it was really close to my heart. And I just finished Spencer's Mountain the other day, and if you guys haven't read that book, you can get it on Kindle. And it is so heartwarming, and it's really a good family um, book. So I recommend that. So this is kind of an adaptation of Olivia Walton's applesauce cake. I am going to use self-rising flour instead of the all-purpose because in my research, I found that the cake is very dense and heavy, and not a lot of people liked it. Now you have to remember this is a Depression era cake, and my dad was a Depression era baby. And he told me that a lot of things were dense and heavy, but they were just happy to have something sweet. So I went ahead and changed out that, and I added an egg, and I think that's all that I really changed. The spices and everything are the same. It has raisins and walnuts. Now, if you're allergic to tree nuts, of course, omit the nuts. We aren't, so I'm going to use the English walnuts. So let me go over what I'm going to do. It's 1 cup of softened butter and 3.5 cups of self-rising flour, 3 eggs, and it has nutmeg, cinnamon, and ground cloves in it. So it's a really spicy cake. And I've got my homemade applesauce. You need 2 cups of that. Of course, the walnuts, vanilla, and I think that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and come around here and put my tripod down a little bit so you can see what I'm going to do. I also have my oven preheated to 350. Okay, I think that's pretty good there. All right, so first what we're going to do is we're going to cream our butter. I'm just going to put it in my KitchenAid mixer, and I'm going to cream it, and then I will add the sugar. Now, the house was a little cold today. If we were gone most of the day, I wouldn't pick Willis up. I had a doctor's appointment. So, he's going to build a fire in a few minutes. He's gone over to the game cameras to see what we've got over there. All right, so I'm going to kind of let this butter, it's melted, but it's not quite as soft as I want it, as you can see, because you do want it to be where you can cream it. All right, let me put it back in there for a few minutes. 4 seconds. All right, that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add the sugar. And this is, let me just make sure, 1 1/4 cup of sugar, white sugar. I was going to add some molasses, but I wanted to see how this recipe would turn out first. So I'm going to go ahead and cream that. Let that go. Now this has a frosting. Now, what's funny, if you have any memories or know anything about the Waltons, the show itself, Olivia did not like any kind of whiskey. She said she was a Baptist and she didn't want whiskey in her house. Well, believe it or not, this recipe has a whiskey frosting. Well, we don't drink, so I'm not going to have any whiskey in it. So I'm just going to make the regular buttercream, so we'll have that later. I'll show you about that later. And we'll see how that tastes. I'm going to go ahead and start creaming this a little bit more. You want it to be nice and creamy because the moisture of the butter helps soften the sugar granules because you don't want a gritty cake. And that's why you basically cream your butter and sugar together first. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and lift that up. I'm using my paddle bit, my paddle accessory. Okay, so I'm going to add 1 egg at a time. So I'm going to put that back on low. So you can let that incorporate in there. I'll probably have to scrape my sides down again. These are fresh hen eggs from our hens. Okay, that was number 3. All right, my island is kind of shaking here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scrape my sides down. That's important so you get everything nicely mixed together. Now, if you watched my video yesterday on the quilt, I haven't done any more to it, but I did want to kind of get that started because I'm pretty excited about fixing that quilt. It means a lot to me. Okay, go ahead and incorporate that. Okay. So what I had to do ahead of time, and I should have told y'all this first, was it calls for 2 cups of raisins. And I went ahead and hydrated my raisins with water. This is a 2-cup measure, and I just poured the raisins in here, a large box, and then I added water. So what I'm going to do now is drain that off, that water off. And let me just do that over here in the sink. I'll drain that water off. You're not going to use that water. I'll let that drain over there. Now, like I said, it's 3½ cups of self-rising flour. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take off approximately a 1/2 cup out of this 3½ cups, because what we're going to do is we're going to put our nuts and our raisins in this flour mixture. And I am going to go ahead and sift the rest of this flour in here and make it nice and fluffy, because it is a cake and you don't want any lumps or bumps in your flour. I'm not using cake flour. In my research, I found somebody said that it didn't seem to matter if you use cake flour or all-purpose. And I try to use self-rising in a lot of my baking because I find that it does a really good job. Of course, there's probably a lot of chefs out there that would disagree with me. It does a good job with keeping things nice and fluffy. I use it in my pancakes, our biscuits, zucchini bread, pumpkin bread. I always use self-rising. And it already has the flour and the leavening in it. So, and that, look how nice and aerated that flour looks once you put it through your sifter. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. I'm going to pour my nuts. This is 1 cup of chopped walnuts, English walnuts. Put that into that 1/2 cup of flour. And then I'm going to add to that the 2 cups of hydrated raisins. And I'm just going to toss that in the flour. And what this does is making sure that the raisins and the nuts just don't fall to the bottom. I do this for a lot of things. Somehow the flour lifts it up and makes it so they just aren't heavy and sink. So if you can see what I'm doing here, just kind of tossing it in this flour, and they're all nicely coated. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is, making sure I've got my recipe over here. Okay. Okay. I've got my applesauce in my flour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate applesauce flour. Okay, so go ahead and turn that on. 2 cups of applesauce. You can buy canned at the store, which is just as good. I can my own, as you guys probably saw in one of my recipes. I just love it. This is the wine sap. Man, it's so yummy. I didn't even put sugar in it. It's so good. All right. Let that kind of incorporate there. Ooh, it looks pretty. Add a little bit more applesauce. Now, Depression era was a time when they didn't have a whole lot of anything, so they did with what they had. Dad told me one time, now my family's from California. I was born there. My dad was born and raised there. And they were migrant workers. And they followed what was blooming or what was ripening or harvesting. And that's what my family, my grandmother and my great-grandmother, they all did that. They were Italian. They picked grapes in Napa. They did all that. So Dad said they lived in tents. This is Depression times. And sometimes all they had to eat was whatever they were harvesting and whatever was on the ground. So can you imagine? He said one time they had apple pie 3 times a day because they were picking apples. So I'm very grateful for the life I have now because that was a hard life. My great-grandmother was usually the cook in the camps there, migrant worker camps. And I only met her one time. She died in 1969 when I was 10, and I think she was like 73. So anyway, that's just a little family history there about the Depression that I know. Okay, I'm going to add the rest of this flour mixture here. Keep that aside. And it's really nice and beat. So, wow, that's a nice cake batter. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, Willis just came in. Hey, Willis. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sprinkle the spices. And this is 2½ teaspoons of cinnamon, ½ teaspoon of nutmeg, and ¼ teaspoon of ground cloves. I'm going to sprinkle it in here on the nuts and the raisins. And also, before I started all this, I made sure that my pan was greased and floured. And I'm using a tube pan. I have read that you can use a bundt pan or you can use it as a layer cake, whatever you want. But all of that's nicely incorporated there. Let me add my teaspoon of vanilla. Stick that in there. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this paddle accessory off. I always call it a paddle bit. I know that's not what it is. That's something else completely. But all right, so I've got the homecoming on over on my TV. I wanted to be inspired. So what I'm going to do now, I have made a mess. I'm going to mix by hand my vanilla, kind of whipping it in there. like so. There it is. Isn't that pretty? It looks yummy. And now I'm going to go ahead and add all these nuts and walnuts, just like that. And I'm going to kind of fold it in. You see me just folding it in here? Not really mixing around, just kind of folding it. That way you're keeping the air in this cake. Like I said in the beginning, I have read that it's kind of a dense, heavy cake. And I'm thinking if I'm folding the ingredients, we might keep some air in there and maybe keep it nice and fluffy. So I think that looks pretty good. It smells awesome. I mean, it really does. So I'm using the tube pan. Like I said, my tube pan. I'm going to go ahead and put my mixture in here, and then we'll put it in the oven. And it's supposed to bake for about 55 to 60 minutes. So I'm going to check it at 55 and see where we are with that. And of course, with cakes, you know, you got to make sure that if you're going to use a toothpick, it comes out clean. And that's what I'm going to use to check. All right, I'm going to switch to this spoon so I can get all this goodness out of here. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Now, I'm a sloppy cook, as you've probably come to know. I can't help it. But I do keep my kitchen clean. Wow, I can't get over the smells. Those smells of the spices. Then you can smell the butter and, oh man, the vanilla. It just smells like Christmas. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of move that batter around in there so it's level. It is a thick batter. A lot thicker than if you were using a box cake. So be aware of that. And yeah, I did taste it. And I do this, kind of shake it around. That levels it. All right, got all the bubbles out. All right, guys, I'm going to put this in a 350 oven Fahrenheit. I believe that's 180 Celsius. And we'll be back as soon as it's done. So, putting it in the oven now. Pretty excited. Olivia's applesauce cake. So, I will be back in a few. Hey, everybody. Well, I'm back. The cake is out of the oven. It's not quite cool yet, but there it is. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I'm going to go ahead and take it out of this tube pan, which is pretty easy. Look at that. Oh, I'm so excited. Wow. That is so pretty. Look at that cake. Well, I'm going to let it cool, and then I'm going to come back and we'll make the frosting for it, and then we'll give it a taste. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, guys, it's time to make the frosting. Here's the cooled cake. I've got it on a cake platter. Now, like I said, I'm not going to use the whiskey in this, but that's optional. So you can go ahead, meat and a raisin, and make your frosting however you want to. This is basically a buttercream. It's just butter, confectioner sugar, and some half and half, and I'm going to put some vanilla in it for flavor. So let me grab my whisk attachment over here. I'm going to go ahead and put one whole stick of butter in. And go ahead and, whoop, let me plug it back in here. A little technical difficulty there. Okay, here we are. Just going to whisk this around so this butter is really well creamed. It's at room temperature. It's really soft. Okay. I find when it starts throwing itself up against the walls of your bowl that it's nice and soft. It's good enough. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the confectioner's sugar. I add all of it at once. It makes a little cloud. So kind of put this on low. You're going to see a cloud because I don't have one of those guards. There we go. Let me grab a spatula. And get this nice and creamed together. It doesn't really cream like you would regular white sugar and butter, but you'll see it come together. Okay, what I'm going to do is just run my spatula down there. You feel the butter, and I just kind of mix it together with my spatula a little bit too. Okay, we'll go ahead and put that back on. Now it's a real, if you've worked with confectioner's sugar before, you know that it's just real fluffy, and that's how this is going to be until you put your 3 tablespoons of half and half in, or cream. Whipping cream would be nice too. If you don't have any of that, you can use just plain milk. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with my half and half. I'm going to start with 1 full tablespoon, 2, and then 3, and it's coming together. And then I'm going to go ahead and add. Now, if you were going to put whiskey in here, you have to put 4 teaspoons. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. You see how that is. And now I may have to add some more of the half and half because I'm not having as much volume as I would if I added that whiskey. So I'm going to go ahead and add another tablespoon. Turn it up. And I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon and see where we are. Yeah, that looks really nice. I'll go ahead and scrape down my sides again. Let it. It's a little thick. So I'm going to add maybe a teaspoon of the half and half. There we go. Oh yeah, I think that's perfect. Perfect. All right, I think we have some yummy frosting. Let's see. Oh man, yeah. I think I got some on my chin. That is really good. Okay, so let me just tell you what I did. I did the 1 full stick of softened butter, 3 cups of powdered sugar. I blended that together, and then I went ahead and I did 5 tablespoons of the half and half with an additional half a teaspoon. And the reason I did that was because I didn't add the whiskey, which would have been more fluid. And then I added 2 teaspoons of the vanilla, and I think it's perfect. So let me grab I don't have an offset spatula, so I'll just use a butter knife to go ahead and put this on here. But man, this is nice. Look at that. Wow. This cake is so old-fashioned in every way. Man, that looks good. Isn't that pretty? Let me put my tripod down a little bit so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. Let's see here. There you go. I think you can see the cake there. Yeah. Okay, good. Use a spatula just to load it on the cake. Wow, this is really nice. If you had some walnuts or some pecans, you could kind of dress up your cake with that too. I know back in the day, Willis and I were talking about it earlier, how we grew up in the country, and a lot of people, they have black walnut trees, and we have access to black walnut trees, but we don't actually have one. We get ours from Kelly, and we also get them from one of the home places over here, and people used to use that as their nuts, and that's a good flavor, would be really good in this too. And I bet you Olivia Walton used black walnuts, because growing up in Virginia, everybody had a walnut tree in their yard. I'm not the best frosting person here, but I'm just doing what I do. But I think it looks really scrumptious. And I'm going to serve Willis a piece in a few minutes, because I know he's been dying for this cake, haven't you, Willis?
Yeah.
And then we'll get his expert opinion as a taste tester. All right, guys, there it is. What do you think? Olivia Walton's applesauce cake. So let me grab a little plate here. And I'm going to cut a piece. Boy, that frosting is to die for, let me tell you. Get a nice big piece here so you can see what this cake looks like. Wow. Wow, that is really nice. Let me bring it over so you can actually see it. Look at that. Now, doesn't that look yummy? Okay, let me take Willis a piece of this cake. Willis, will you try that cake? I'm going to cut myself a piece. It's still a little bit warm in the middle.
Wow, it's the best cake I ever ate in my life.
Is it really?
It's really good.
It's good, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
That's yummy. The cake's not super sweet, but the frosting makes up for that, doesn't it?
Wow, that's really good.
I can see why Olivia Walton wanted to make this cake. Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Hope you try this cake. I'll put the recipe in the description. And tomorrow we'll have something else for day 2 of the countdown to Christmas. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would. I'd really appreciate it. Y'all have a good evening. Bye.